Welcome to our LinkedIn Live. Hopefully everybody can see us and hear us. If you can hear us and see us, give us a thumbs up so we know that everything is working the way it should. If everybody can see us, give us a thumbs up here on LinkedIn so we can see. As we're waiting for more people to join, I just want to welcome everybody to our event. So everybody can see us, can hear us. Great. Okay, so I am seeing the thumbs up. Again, if you guys can't hear us or see us, type it in the chat. We'll try to troubleshoot it in case anybody is having any issues. But just to kick it off, welcome everybody to our Soulcast Media live event on powerful body language communications. I want to introduce everybody to my very good friend, Ted. As you can see here, she's on the screen as well. Ted, first of all, thank you so much for joining. To give everybody an idea of who we are, if this is the first time you guys are meeting us, Ted, why don't you go first? Please introduce yourself to the audience. I know we have tons of people from all over the world right now who are watching. We have about more than 70 people logged in right now. So Ted, please give us an introduction of who you are, what do you do, and how did you get into body language?
Great. Well, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the invite. So I'm a behavioral scientist and a body language expert. And I basically watch people's body language all day for a living, which is really, really nice to do. I help people to fine-tune their body language so they can show the very best of themselves and get the results that they want in an interaction. I also help people to understand the body language of other people so they can tune into their emotions and have really powerful and impactful interactions with them and make a real connection.
So just for everybody who's logging in right now, I'm here with my friend Ted. And Ted, actually, tell everybody, where are you right now?
I'm actually in Holland right now. It's 2 a.m., as you say, in the middle of the night here. So I have lots of lights to make it look like it's in the middle of the day.
I'm so grateful for Ted, it's 2 a.m. where she is right now in Holland. So Ted, thank you so much for staying up so late to do this LinkedIn Live, because this is such an important topic. And of course, I'm in the US, you're in Europe. We have a lot of people in Asia who I believe it's their morning time right now. So it's really hard trying to coordinate everyone's schedule. But for everybody who is just joining in right now, I just want to let everybody know that I'm here with my friend Ted, who is a body language expert. And for the next 45 minutes or so, Ted and I are going to be having a conversation about body language and communications. For those who follow Soulcast Media, you guys know that we're a business communications agency. And a huge part of communications, Ted, as you know, is body language. Body language makes up a huge part of how you are perceived, your confidence, how comfortable and confident you are. So everybody who is on this call or who's watching us on LinkedIn, we have a lot of great information that we're going to be chatting with you about. So if you have any questions as we're conversing, feel free to leave it in the comments. We see all your comments, and we'll make sure that we'll have some time carved out at the end to answer any questions you have. So just to get started, so Ted introduced us. She's in Holland right now, and she's a body language expert, and she just shared how she got into this. So Ted, what is something that you really want people to know when it comes to body language? So I know you work with a lot of companies, also a lot of teams and executives on body language. How do we even start to approach teaching somebody how they can utilize their body language and be a good communicator and executive presence, which we'll talk about later?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to realize that when we communicate, we have 2 channels, right? We can use our words to get the information across, but to get our emotions and intention across, we use our body language. And the thing is, we think about our words. So, if I say the wrong word right now, I realize that, and I change it. But we're not very conscious of our body language. It sort of leaks through unconsciously. So it can totally underline what I'm saying, but also sabotage what I'm saying if I'm not doing it right. So it's really, really important for the message and to get the message across to line these up. If I would be on this call and I'd say to you, yeah, I'm very happy to be here, you probably wouldn't believe me, right? Because there's incongruency between the two. And because our body language is so strong, it's like 12 to 13 times stronger than our words. It's really important that you are aware of it, because if it's not congruent, people will believe what they see and not what they hear.
Why is body language so much more powerful than what you choose to say? And I know in the communications world, we always talk about these three things. And I think, Ted, you and I have talked about it. Communications is your body language, your tone of voice, and then your choice of words. Why is body language so powerful?
Well, it really shows your intention and your emotion. So if I would leave it all out and I would talk to you like this, and my voice is really monotonous, right? And you don't see anything, I still get my words across and the information, but you don't really see what I mean by it. And we need both of those things to really understand what the other person is saying. So if we don't show enough body language, which, for example, is really hard right now to do online because we only have this little screen, right? It's really hard for people to understand what we're saying.
So one of the reasons why Ted and I also connected, for those who are watching, is for those know, I have a LinkedIn learning course specifically on executive presence. So for those who haven't seen it, make sure to check it out. It's basically teaching people how to develop executive presence on video. And executive presence is, how you carry yourself, how you communicate, and how you make other people feel. But when I talk about executive presence, and Ted, feel free to chime in. When I talk about executive presence, I also talk a lot about body language, right? So, things like your shoulders, how are you positioning your shoulders to display confidence? How are you also using your hands to exemplify, use it to, engage somebody. So I talk about it a lot. So for you, what are some, indicators of confidence when it comes to body language?
Yeah. So what you just said is really important. Your posture, your posture shows a lot about your emotion. If we look at athletes who are blind from birth, if they win something, they stand like this. They take up a lot of space, right? And they've never seen that before. So we automatically do that when we feel really confident. We have our elbows out. If we're not, we're like this. We're scared. We freeze up. So, your posture says a lot of space between your ears and your shoulders, sit up straight. The other thing is the hand gestures, what you just said. If you use like symmetrical hand gestures that are really slow and underline what you say instead of, really high up and really chaotic, makes you less confident. So your hand gestures are really important in that as well. You can use your smile as well. A smile is a really warm signal, but if I smile all the time like this, then it's not really confidence. So you should really go down a bit in smiling if you want to look more confident. I think a lot of women in leadership positions smile a lot, right? And often too much, which makes them look less competent than, for example, males who don't do that a lot.
So for those who are watching right now, what are some things that you can recommend that they should be mindful of when they are communicating if they want to exhibit that confidence? And when I teach communications, I get how sometimes it's very uncomfortable for people to, converse or communicate because of, whatever reason, whether it's something that they're afraid of or intimidated. But sometimes I say you cannot wait to feel confident before you speak. Sometimes you actually just have to, take that proactive approach, and then that confidence will come, right? Yeah. Sometimes if you wait to feel confident, sometimes that feeling won't ever come, and therefore you just don't say anything at all. So for you, how can you exhibit that confidence? What are some things people can do with their bodies that can show confidence immediately, even though they may not necessarily feel it yet?
Yeah, yeah. So I find that a hard question, because if you start faking it, then people will see it as well, right?
Mhm.
I always say, find a situation where you did feel really confident, somewhere in your past or an experience, and tune into that feeling that you had at that moment, and use that feeling to take to the moment where you might not feel so confident. So your confidence comes from within, and you use that experience to exhibit that confidence. I also think that if you are not confident and you're nervous, for example, if I would start doing this all the time, or do this all the time, and I realize that if I'm aware of that, then I can replace it with other things that make me look more confident. So awareness is a big thing in knowing how to come across, and then fine tuning it to come across the way you want to.
So people who are not confident, you'll notice that sometimes they'll just like kind of
Mm.
fidget a little bit. You've noticed it too?
Yeah, yeah. So what a lot of people do is we call it comforting gestures. So it's like, when we were little, our parents would do that. If we were nervous or if we were sad. But now as adults, we do it to ourselves. So we start comforting like this, or we do it like this, or if you wear a necklace, a lot of women start touching here. So these are the things that make us calm. We want ourselves to calm down. And other things are movement. If we make a lot of repetitive movements, if I would go like this all the time, or I sit on a chair, I immediately look less confident and competent when I do all that.
I
But
see that a lot, actually, Ted. I see a lot of people when they're sitting at home on a meeting, they move
yeah,
their chair around a lot.
yeah, I always say don't use a chair that can move a lot if you don't feel really confident or nervous, because it comes out, it leaks through in your body language. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because now that a lot of us are in this, remote world and we're doing a lot of video calls, I say impressions, they're still being made, right?
Mm,
People
mm,
can still see what
mm,
everybody is doing. So
mm.
even subtle things like, honestly, even if people just are on their phones when they're in a meeting, it's so obvious, it's so distracting. But
Yeah.
people, when they're talking and they're doing things with their body, people notice this, right?
Mm,
I
mm,
think I think professionals need to be more mindful. They need to
mm.
be more mindful of kind of like how are they using their body when they're talking in a one-on-one meeting, in a team meeting, or when they're doing a presentation.
Yeah.
One of the things, Ted, that we've talked about before too together is trust, right? And
Mm,
how can you use your body to showcase and have other people feel that you're trustworthy,
mm.
especially early on, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So what happens in a first impression, in the first few seconds, like your reptilian brain at the back here, decides if they like you or not. If you're competent, if you're likable, if you're credible, and that happens really quickly. So you need to be aware of that the moment someone sees you, you need to display signals
Mhm.
that get other people to trust you. So ways you can do that is, for example, have your hands in the frame or have your hands visible, because hands are a huge indicator of trust, right? If I put my hands behind my back like this, I accidentally activate the fear part of your brain. And I don't want to do that if I want to create a connection with you, because if you're scared, then you can't relax around me. And, you're not positive towards me or the information that I'm going to give you. So your hands are really, really important, especially online. You can wave or go like this. Oh, nice to meet you.
Mhm.
And the other thing is the smile, what I just said. Your smile
Mhm.
is a submissive signal. So monkeys do it as well. If they walk past a dominant male, they're like, hello, I'm not going to hurt you. So it's the same with us. It
Wow.
shows that you want to be a friend, and that people can trust you. And it's also really contagious. So if I smile at you on my first impression, you smile back at me, maybe
Mhm.
unconsciously, but it happens in your brain. So that means that endorphins are released in your body, which make you really relaxed around me, so we can start having a connection. So, show your hands, have a smile, use your eyebrows. If you see someone that you recognize, you'd go like, hello, how are you? And
Yeah,
your eyebrows go up, right? You do that as well when you meet someone on the street, right?
right.
So if you do that with another person in your first impression, then immediately they sort of think, oh, this feels familiar. I know
Mhm.
this person, and the connection with that person is a lot easier that way.
So I have a question because I imagine this is one of the things that people are thinking about. So we're talking about building trust through body
Mm.
language, and you're talking about how you can utilize your hands, your smile, your eyes.
Mhm.
But what if you're meeting somebody and you may not feel the most comfortable? How do you still smile in a way that
Mm.
appears genuine when
Yeah.
you're perhaps nervous?
Yeah, that's a really good question because people can see it if your smile is fake, right?
Mhm.
And we have two kinds of smiles. It's like a social bonding smile, which is in the bottom of our face. So if I go like this, I'm not laughing with my eyes, but if I do laugh with my eyes, it's a sincere smile. Um, so what I always try to do, like before the cameras turn on or before I go into an appointed meeting, I think of something really positive. So I always think of my dad giggling because it's really, really funny, right? And it makes me smile immediately. So at that moment, I turn my camera on and I say, "Oh, welcome everyone," and then I have a sincere smile. So you need to connect to that positive emotion to be able to display that. And if you're in a bad mood, then don't go into that meeting. Do something to to
Yeah.
get into a better mood. Yeah.
So it's like having that mental preparation that
Yeah.
perhaps it's not the most natural meeting you're going into or a meeting you're not excited about, but
Mm.
perhaps, you know, telling yourself or reminding yourself of a moment that made you excited and happy and then carry that into that meeting, then your smile will be genuine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
This reminds me of another thing we talked about, Ted, the idea of priming.
Mm.
So I've heard, so before you and I even started chatting, I have heard the word priming before in terms of like when you're meeting somebody. But for those who don't know what priming means when it comes to communications and interacting, what is priming?
Yeah, so priming is that with your words or with colors or images, you can influence people's thoughts. So if I would say to you, don't think of a pink elephant, immediately you think about that, right? So
Mhm.
with my words, I can influence you. So that's very important, especially in first interactions, because what we tend to do is say to people, so have you been really busy as well? And then our brain starts looking for examples of busy, 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 which is quite negative, right? Or the traffic was really bad. But if you start with like a positive conversation topic, like, which great projects are you working on at the
Mm.
moment? People start looking in their head for great things, and that influences their emotion and the energy that they bring into that meeting. There was a really great experiment where they put people in a dark room, right? And they gave them a bowl of yogurt and they said, rate the strawberry flavor of this yogurt. So people were eating it and like 59% said, yeah, that's great, strawberry flavor. And then when they got out, it was actually chocolate yogurt, right? So they were so influenced by that question that they actually thought they were eating something different. So it's really, really powerful. And I think you know more about that as well because you use power words a lot, right?
Mhm.
In your communication.
Yes. So for power words, and this is something that I teach when I'm, in helping people with their communications, power words are strategic words that you want to use when you're engaging with somebody to evoke some sort of emotion in that person versus it just being kind of like a monotoned conversation. So examples of power words are, instead of saying, using dynamic words. So like excited,
Mm,
fantastic, or it gives you that sense of urgency with whoever you're speaking with
mm,
versus saying, oh, that was good.
mm,
Instead you can say that was fantastic,
mm,
right? And immediately, because I'm using a more powerful word, the other person is now a little bit more engaged because they're like, first of all, that's an unusual word, it's not as
mm.
common as good,
Yeah,
but I also now have the other people's like attention because now they're fascinated, like that
yeah.
power word. One of the other power words that I use is, and I've made tons of LinkedIn content on this, so for those watching, you may be familiar, but I love saying other people's names when I'm
Mm,
conversing with them. I think it's a great way to show that, I'm here with you, I'm engaged,
yeah,
I'm present. And it's just a good way to, I think, build that rapport. But I
yeah.
always have this little caveat. It's also about how you say their name, right? You don't want to be like, Jessica, how,
Mhm.
and then that sounds a lot more stern, but it's like, It was really good talking with you, Jessica. So it's like using their name in that way, but
Yeah.
that's what I mean by power words. Is this something that you ever think about, Ted?
Yeah, I do, and I also think of getting off the normal script. So
Mm.
if you always ask the same question like "How are you today?" It's very normal and it doesn't wake people's minds up. So what you
Yeah.
want to do is say something that gets them out of that routine. So you could say things. What great things happened to you today instead of "How are you?" which is different, and it sort of makes them remember you better. And it's a great start to a conversation as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree. We all have these scripts, right? The typical, how are you? How was your weekend? How's the weather? Things like that. And I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with it, because that's just kind of natural. But if you are trying to kind of like capture someone's attention to be like, oh, that's a, more unusual question. I think that's a fantastic strategy.
Yeah.
By the way, for anybody who's watching right now, I know we have a good number of folks who are watching, so thank you so much. If you have any questions for Ted and I, feel free to put it into the chat. I'm looking at all the questions, so we'll be sure to answer it at the end. So feel free to ask us any questions that you personally have about communications, about body language. But one of the other things that I wanted to ask you, Ted, because today's focus is body language, is the idea of connection. So, we can also build connection with people through our body language. And I think this also probably touches upon the whole trust that we just talked about. But what does body language and connection have to do together?
Yeah, so there's some really powerful body language signals that you can send to the other person to create that connection. And one of them, especially online these days, is eye contact. If you have eye contact with someone, oxytocin is released, which is a cuddle hormone basically. And it makes sure that if it is released with me and with you, we can create a connection. Eye contact is also important because it activates the social part of your brain, which makes it possible for us to have genuine interactions. We can laugh, we can tell jokes, and we can smile at each other with a sincere smile. And what I see these days is that it's really hard to have virtual eye contact, right? Because I have to think about, so how does the other person feel if I look at the bottom of my screen? Then they probably feel excluded and that I'm not interested, and then we lose all the connection together. So these days it's really hard to do that, but in real life, you have eye contact. When we can, we touch, so that releases oxytocin as well. A handshake, for example. But when you're listening as well, there's lots of signals you can send out. I can lean into you when I hear something that I like. I can say, "Oh yeah, that's really interesting," or I can nod with positive expressions, because if I nod like this, it's very boring, right? So yeah, there's lots of warm signals that you can send out to make the other person feel that he's really heard and that you're there and that the focus is on that person. And I think we forget that sometimes. We're so busy multitasking, checking our emails while we're talking to other people, checking our phone, and that is really bad for the connection that we have with other people.
What is something that you would tell everybody here who's watching right now? Because I imagine a lot of us are doing those video calls. What are some, maybe one or two tips you can share that people can perhaps implement right away when they jump on their next Zoom meeting in a few hours? What's something they can do?
Yeah, so I think it's really important that people see your body, because we only have this little bit of the screen. And what I see a lot is that you only see people's face, right? You see this. So put your laptop in a way that the people can see you from under your rib cage up until your head, so you can give them as many non-verbal signals, so it's really easy for them to understand. It sort of makes them less tired because they can see your intention and emotion. Raise your laptop so your eye level with your camera, so people don't look up to you or look down at you, which gives you a sort of an equal conversation with the other person. So your distance is important as well. If I'm too close to you, I'm in your face all the time, that's not really nice.
Yeah.
It's like people that get into your intimate space while you don't really want that. But if I go too far, if I lean back like this, it's also like, we have no connection anymore. So you want it about an arm length away, so they can see you and you have a connection and you can lean in, to actually emphasize that connection.
The one interesting thing that I've noticed, so when COVID first hit, especially I'll talk about here in the US, when COVID first hit and a lot of us were just starting to really get on these Zoom calls or, Microsoft Team calls, I felt like in the beginning, everybody's camera position was just kind of all over the place, honestly. Sometimes people's head would be on the corner, sometimes it would be like shooting up. It was just like the positioning of everyone's camera was literally, I've seen crazy, crazy things, right? I will say, now that we're, a few months in, unfortunately, people have, though, improved their setup a lot more now. And I think people are more mindful of just what you said, Ted, making sure that they can see the upper body. And when I talk to people about developing executive presence, I say, when you're talking to an executive and their face is so close, their executive presence just goes out the door. Executive presence really is what you just said. Like, from a visual standpoint, it's seeing the upper half of the body, right? Your shoulders, and just being mindful of the position. I also talk about things like lighting. I know lighting is a little different from body language, but having good lighting is really important too.
Yeah, because if you have good lighting, people can see your whole face, right? And that's really important, because if you're transparent with your emotions, it's really easy for them to anticipate on what you're going to say, but also understand you better. So for example, I train a lot of CEOs who say to me that they're very, very warm, and when I talk to them, I see that they're very gentle and nice persons, but they don't have any expression on their face, so it makes them look really cold, and they might be very competent but really cold. So if people can't see your face because the lighting is bad, they can't see your facial expressions, and they might get a totally different impression of you than what you want. So it's really important.
That's a really good point. So I also work with a lot of CEOs who, as a person, they are so fantastic. And I do know that they are very warm and they're giving and they really want to help, but they do tend to have more of that stern look. So what advice would you give those who tend to have this more stern look, but you really are trying to teach them to be more warm and engaging? Because as a CEO, you want to give the sense that, you're approachable, you're relatable. So what are some tips?
Yeah, so it's basically when you are a leader, people want to see two body language cues, right? One side they want to see warmth, and on the other side they want to see competence. So with the warmth, they're asking the questions, are you friendly? Can I trust you? Are you likable? And on the competence side, they want to know, are you capable and powerful? So it's important that those two in executive presence sort of match, that they come together, that you have both of these, because then you're really charismatic. So becoming aware of where you are, if you're more to the competent side or more to the warm side, can give you a starting point for starting to fine-tune your signals. So if you want to be more warm, in the example that giving, you want to nod, you want to maybe tilt your head, because that's a really warm signal. You want to lean in more, use like hand gestures where you show your wrist, because that's a really vulnerable part as well. And if I show that I want to be your friend, and that I'm not afraid. So we start fine-tuning to the side that needs more attention. What I do is I'm not changing the way you are. I'm just making people aware of that gap of how they think people see them and how people actually perceive them, so they can start using the skills to come across the way they want to, and come across and with a reflection of who they really are.
That's a really good tip. And you said it perfectly. A lot of the things that you and I are talking about right now, for a lot of people, using body language strategically isn't something that they often think about, right? And what we're saying is, it's not that you have to do all these things. Obviously, it has to come from a very natural and good place. But what we're trying to do is to just start planting the seed in everybody's head to think about, okay, next time I talk with somebody, right,
Mm.
I want to come off this way. So even having that mentality, that intention, okay, I'm walking into this meeting. I want everybody to know that I'm very warm and approachable.
Mm.
Okay, let me do this with my body.
Mm.
Or if I'm going into a meeting and it's like, I want to be more stern because it's
Mm.
a serious meeting.
Mm.
Okay, this is what I should do with my body to convey the seriousness or urgency,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I think it's really a shame if people can't show how competent they really are. You know, for example, if they're really nervous and all these nervous signals take over, and they look less credible because of that. So
Mhm.
becoming aware of that is so important for your leadership presence. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're having a number of fantastic questions coming in right
Great.
now. I want to make sure that we address some of these questions. So
Mm.
one of the questions that I saw, by the way, anybody who has questions, continue to throw it into the chat. One of the questions that I saw somebody ask is, what is the difference between body language between men and women?
Oh, that's a good question. So the difference is that women actually use more of their brain in reading body language. So
Hmm.
it's not like it's better or worse. It's just different. For example, women have a broader vision. You know, if they meet someone, they don't have to look up and down like men do, because men have more like a focal vision, which makes sense from an evolutionary point of view, right? Because they have to hunt and focus while women see the bigger picture. I also women are from I want to say trained, but that's not the right word. But women are more inclined to be more on the warm side, right? To take care of people, so to be more warm, so they show a lot of these signals, while men tend to go to the competent side. So that's the difference in how they interact. So a lot of women leaders should really watch that, so they come across as really credible instead of just warm. Yeah, because it sort of sabotages their leadership presence that way.
So there really is a difference between men and
Yeah,
women
yeah,
and how they utilize their
yeah,
body.
yeah, definitely. And women usually tend to have more facial expressions than men. For example, men look more, their face is more like Putin, for example, while women go more to the other side.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of different. Yeah.
So one of the other things I was just thinking of when you were explaining that, can having too much body language hurt somebody's credibility, trust, and connection? Too much of it.
I'm not sure about too much. Like if I start using lots of hand gestures, it makes
Mhm.
me look very different than if I don't. I think you need to be aware of choosing the right ones for the right
Mhm.
situation, while still being your authentic self. So a lot of people say to me, so if I start using these signals, do I come across as really fake, because it's not me? And
Mhm.
I don't think that's true. I think if you become aware of it, you can actually show people who you really are.
Mhm.
And the other thing is, it's not like black and white, it's not like you either use hand signals or you don't. It's
Yeah.
like a spectrum. So if you don't use any hand signals and you find that hard, just tune it up a little bit, just use
Mhm.
your hands a little bit so it still feels comfortable for you, instead of just going to the other side. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really good tip. One of the other questions that I just saw somebody write in is, how can you utilize your body language if you're in a meeting with, a group of people, and let's say even on video, how can you use your body language to signal that you want to speak or to capture people's attention so they're listening to you?
Yeah, so that's a thing that's really hard when you're
Mhm.
doing virtual meetings, because normally we look the other person in the eye and we still have peripheral vision,
Mhm.
and we are able to decode the body language of other people. But if you're in a meeting with like 6 or 7 people, it's really hard to pick up on those really subtle body language aspects of other people. So I would suggest that when the meeting is starting, you agree with each other on a signal that you use, when you want to interrupt or ask something, raise your hand or something like that. So it's really clear for everyone if someone wants to take that turn. It's a really bad, like a disadvantage of virtual meetings, that we can't really decode the body language of the people around us, and it's really bad for the quality of our interactions as well. But if I do that, and then I can't look at you anymore, so it's a choice that you have to make, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm talking, I look into the camera. If I'm not talking, I might look at other people and see their body language, but it's still not as good as when we talk face to face.
So you're saying in these, especially these video meetings, establishing kind of a rule that if somebody, you can see them waving their hand, then that's a signal like, hey, let's give, Ted or Jessica the chance to talk because we can see.
Yeah. And I think a moderator really helps in that, right? Or someone who watches that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's one of the things that I talk about when I teach people about having engaging meetings. It's the leader should act as like the moderator. They should put their moderator hat on and really look at everybody from a gallery view, right? So they can see everybody, and then they'll know that, oh, if John is waving, then let's give John the opportunity to talk, because sometimes people can talk over each other.
Yeah.
One of the other questions that I'm seeing right now is, how can you continue to show that you're interested in a conversation using your body language when sometimes the conversation can get silent, or but it's like you're still interested? How do you show that?
So when there's a silence online, or what's the question exactly?
Let's just say you're engaging with somebody and it's kind of starting to taper off, but you still want to show that you're really engaged.
Yeah. So a really powerful one is nodding. If someone finishes with talking and you nod slowly, like 3 times, they usually continue talking. So, you show that you're still interested and that you want them to keep going. And usually then they do. So you keep eye contact as well. Don't look away or turn your body away. I see that a lot online, that people sit on a second screen like this, and I totally lose every connection with you. So keep showing those listening signals, these non-verbal signals, to show your interest. And, there's nothing wrong with silence. I think these days people sort of try to avoid it. We have to talk all the time or have music on all the time. But silence is really important for people to think of their thoughts and what they want to say, and to let it sink in. So don't be afraid of it. It's a normal thing in a conversation, and even online, you can just be silent and think about things. I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
I agree. And actually, I was talking to somebody recently about that, how silence is okay. Because a lot of people are so afraid that they just kind of say something really quickly. But you can be in silence, but still show you're engaged just by nodding your head. So if you ask me a question, Ted, and I really don't know the answer, so I'm thinking, I'm nodding my head, but you can see it because I'm thinking. So it's like I'm still engaged, even though I'm not saying.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good one. So one of the other questions that I have here actually has to do with eye contact specifically. So how can you utilize your eyes without seeming, too intense either, right? There's some people who literally would just stare at you.
Yeah. That's a really good question. So when we talk, we normally have like 40% of the time we have eye contact, and the rest of the time we look up, we think, we look at our notes, we look away. If I have eye contact with you all the time in a conversation, it feels really dominant, right? It's really like, oh, I wanna impress you. So you shouldn't do that. But if you have shifting eyes all the time, people will see you as less likable and more nervous as well. So you need to have the fine line. So when we listen, it's about 60 to 70% of eye contact, and when we talk, it's about 40%. So you're definitely right. You don't want to have too much of it. And across cultures, every culture has eye contact. It's just a matter of some cultures have a bit less and some have a bit more. But that eye contact is important for a conversation. Is the same in every culture.
Is there such a thing, and this is actually one of the questions that we just got, is there such a thing as wrong or right body language? And how you can, is there such a thing?
No, I don't think so. I think the right body language is the body language that reflects the real you. right? If you show the world who you are and you show the self that you want to share with others, then that's great. For example, I was doing this body language course a few years ago, and I walked into this really expensive building, and there's all these guys in suits sitting there, right? Really expensive shoes and suitcases. And I was intimidated straight away. So I just sat down, I didn't look at them, I started reading my book. And then later they had to rate me on how I came across. And they all said that I was really, really cold. And that made me realize that, I'm not a cold person. But if I want them to see me as a warm person, then I have to show the signals that make me look warm. So that was a real eye-opener for me, thinking, if I want to come across the way that I actually am, then I have to show people that.
Is that kind of what sparked you to be more mindful of your body language? Because how you were trying to be perceived was taking like the completely opposite direction?
Yeah, it made me realize how powerful it was, right? That just adding some warmth signals could change the perception of people of me, and people's reaction to me as well. So it has completely changed my connection with people now that I know what to do to reflect who I really am, because that's what I want people to see. The real me, and not the one that is nervous or doesn't know what to do with her body. Yeah.
I think that's where smiling, I mean, for me, that's where it comes, a huge part. Because I remember early on in my career, when I was a news reporter, I would always have this very serious face. And I felt that I had to be serious to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
But that is not the case. I don't always have to have like a stern face for people to think that, oh, Jessica means business. I can still be warm, but also still very intentional and direct. And, so that's when I realized, for me personally, that I should be okay and I should feel comfortable giving that warmth and showing that warmth. But, I can still be taken seriously too. It's not that it takes away anything.
Yeah. It's funny because when you ask people, do you want others to see you as warm or as competent? People always say, oh, I want them to see me as a competent person. But if you ask people what they like to see in another person, they always say, oh, I'd like to see a warm person. So it's a sort of a difference what people think others would like to see and, what they would like to project themselves. Yeah.
That's a very interesting point. People want to appear competent, but really people want and prefer the other person to be warm versus competent.
Yeah.
Really good one. One of the questions that we have right now is, any recommendations for a resting face? Resting face.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So what happens is most people are not conscious of their resting face, right? Especially online, people listen like this. Right, and it's a really negative thing. So look at yourself right now. How do you listen to us? What is your face saying right now?
What does your face look like right now, everybody?
Yeah. Are you sitting there with a frown like this? Do you have two lines here, which looks a lot like a micro expression of anger, but it's also a concentration face. But it's not a really nice face for other people to look at. So I would suggest that you try to have a more open and positive face, like open your eyes more, don't squint like this, have a slight smile and nod, all these warm signals that we just talked about, and know what your face is doing, know what it looks like, use your eyebrows to indicate interest to other people, but definitely don't have a really negative face when you listen to people, because, it sort of doesn't create that connection that you really want to have. Yeah.
That's a really good point. And, to exactly what you're saying, when I'm engaging with other people, in my mind, I'm like, okay, for the next 30 minutes, the 1 hour, or however long my meeting is, I need to be hyper mindful of how I show up, right?
Yeah.
But, once our meeting is ended, then I can go back and, relax and, be, act and use my body the whatever way I want to feel comfortable. But I always am, if I have a meeting with somebody, I need to be and present my best self in this 31-hour meeting, right? And I think people sometimes feel that how they act outside of a meeting and in a meeting is exactly the same. I always say there is a difference in kind of like how you should show up.
Yeah. Yeah. And you should think about how you want to show up, and choose the signals accordingly, what you said before. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, so I know we're about to end soon, which
Okay.
I wanted to thank everybody for, being on this call with me and Ted. Ted is a body language expert. This is her world, so that's why I wanted to invite her here to share her expertise and just honestly have a fun conversation together. So I'm going to take maybe just a few more questions. And also for those, if we don't get to your question, you can always email us and I can pass it over to Ted, and we're happy to, answer any questions you have, because like I said, I teach communications. Body language is a huge part of communications. So these are all really important topics and what it means in a video world, right? So one of the other questions that I'm seeing right now is, and perhaps you may know something about culture and body language. And are there differences depending on Eastern culture, Western culture, or anything in how you use your body?
Yeah, so there's differences in distance, in touch, and in eye contact. For example, Italians, they like to touch and use their hands a lot, while people in Japan, for example, have less eye contact and have a bigger distance. So there's definitely differences, yeah. And when you're not sure about how things are in a different culture, it's really the best thing you can do is see what other people do and then mirror that or mimic that. So, you don't offend anyone by using too much eye contact or too much touch or standing too close to someone. So it's really important to be aware of those differences and look at them and then adjust yourself so you fit in to that culture and respect what other people are doing.
So be mindful. So what works in this culture doesn't necessarily translate into that culture.
No. Like we just moved and we have an Italian neighbor. And when he first met my husband, he gave him 2 kisses on the cheek. And we were like, oh, what's this? But, for them, it's really normal. So you have to adjust to their culture. Yeah.
So as we wrap up here, one of the things that I want to ask you, Ted, and for everybody who is listening, is there, Ted, anything that you can impart on our listeners and our guests and everybody who's watching right now? Any tips that you think, okay, when it comes to body language, doing these simple things can immediately elevate how you appear, how you come off? What's something that you can share with everybody? And I will also share something afterwards too.
So I think really important is before you go into a meeting or a conversation, think about what your purpose is. What do you want to get out of it? Or how do you want to show up? And think about, if I have to be likable and more warm, or I want to be competent in this context, what body language signals should I display to come across that way? Don't make it fake. Stay authentic to yourself. Don't do anything that doesn't feel comfortable. And if you want to practice like one thing at a time. Maybe practice the eye contact virtual, and when that's part of your communication style, then move on to the next thing. So it's really awkward at the start. I want to share that, especially. Don't be put off by it being awkward, because it means that you're learning, and that you're becoming aware of it, and that it's going to be part of your communication style. So embrace that uncomfortable feeling and just have fun with it.
Totally. And one of the things I will add to that is, for those who've been following me, I'm very open in telling people that I really truly struggled with communicating and feeling confident and comfortable communicating, especially when I started out in my career. I really had to learn. I had to teach myself these things. I had to learn these techniques, body language, tone of voice, speaking slower, right? So communicating well wasn't something that always was a very natural thing for me. There certainly are people who are natural communicators, amazing, commanding, natural, right? I was envious of that. And I've always been like, gosh, I wish I could talk that way, right? But I will say, there is value in putting the work and learning these techniques and skills. And if it doesn't come naturally to you, there's tons of people who teach communications. We teach communications, right? And I think just even spending a little bit of time learning it, it's kind of one of those things that once you learn the technique, it'll stick with you this whole time. Ted, is there anything else you'd like to add as we wrap up?
And I just want to say thank you. You know, it's been so much fun. So thanks for the invite, and thank you everyone who's been watching. Yeah, and if you have any questions, just email them to us. It would be great to think about those. Yeah.
Absolutely. So if anybody has any questions, you can find more information on the Soulcast Media page. It has all our contact information, and we'll be sure to also link Ted into that. So if anybody has any questions for Ted or wants to reach out to Ted, you can do so by finding us on Soulcast Media or on our LinkedIn page. Such as here right now. One of the things I wanted to add really quickly, just because we have here, for those who don't know, we have a Soulcast Media membership. And this membership program is for those who are looking for regular communications practice. I'm the one teaching this communications every single month. And sometimes I will invite guests and they'll teach their own communication specialties. So for those who are familiar with the membership, we open it up every so often. And basically this gives you the chance to have a regular communications practice where I teach things like tone of voice, you know, interpersonal communications. I also talk a little bit about body language, even though Ted's really the expert here. But anyways, so make sure you check that out on our website. But Ted, oh my goodness, thank you.
Thank you as
well. I know it is almost 3 a.m. where you are at. Oh my goodness, I'm sure you just want to go to bed right now. But again, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in to our Soulcast Media live event on body language. And we will have this posted on our LinkedIn, so feel free to share it or rewatch it. So thank you, guys. I will see you guys soon. Thank you, Ted.
Bye-bye.
Bye.